Casey's biggest hits.
7 years ago this week, back in 1989, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by the British group Simply Red. It's a tribute by lead singer Mick Hucknall to the classic Philadelphia soul song he says made him want to become a musician. I'll have details and that big hit after this.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Mark Elliott for Kasem. Now, we're up to the #1 song in the USA, and it's a smash for a red-headed Englishman who made his public singing debut at the age of 6. Mick Hucknall told us that for as long as he can remember, he's listened to pop music. He was born in 1960, which means he was very young when the Beatles, the Stones, and the Who started charting. But Mick says that as early as the age of 3 or 4, he couldn't get enough of their music. By the time he was 6, he'd memorized dozens of songs by the top acts of the day, in particular songs by his idols, the Beatles. Mick told us, quote, "According to my aunts, I used to be able to find my favorite tracks by the size of the bands on the records. I couldn't read the names of the songs on the labels, but I knew where they were on the albums." It was at this time that Mick Hucknall made his on-stage debut. He says, quote, "It was at my Auntie Jennifer's wedding. I remember there was a grown-up band there. They brought me to the mic and told me I could sing anything I wanted to. I told them to play 'I Want to Hold Your Hand.' I knew all the words, and apparently it's on tape somewhere. Somebody in my family has the performance on reel-to-reel tape." Well, it was a modest beginning, but look what it's led to. By the time he was in his teens, Mick Hucknall was putting bands together. And now, at the age of 29, instead of singing Beatles #1s, Mick's got a chart topper with his own band. For the second week in a row, the #1 song in the USA is by Simply Red, "If You Don't Know Me By Now."
Casey's Top 40.
From Hollywood, this is Kasem. And from Manchester, England, here's Mick Hucknall and his band Simply Red. You know, when Mick was 12, he bought his first single. It was a Diana Ross song titled, get this, "Doobie-doopin'-doobie-doopin'-doobie-doobie-doopin'-doo." And when Mick was 27, he wrote a song for Diana with a far shorter title, Shine.
Up till now, some of their biggest hits have been remakes of old soul hits, like when they scored big with their version of If You Don't Know Me By Now, originally recorded by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. But Simply Red say that's all about to change. Their lead singer Mick Hucknall told interviewer Beverly Meyer, "I feel like our first 3 albums were like the first volume of my and Simply Red's story, and now this new album is the beginning of volume 2. It represents an end of an era for me in a great many ways. And among those changes, Mick's hired a new bass player and drummer for the band, and he feels that as a songwriter, he's pushing himself a little bit further. All the songs on Simply Red's new album, Stars, are originals, collaborations between Mick and band member Fritz McIntyre. There are no cover tunes this time out. Mick says, "There was no way I wanted to do a cover on the next album because I didn't want to be labeled as a guy who goes around only singing soul classics. I wanted to write my own material and make it strong enough that it would stand up to any of those things, and I'm really happy with the way this record has turned out."
Hi, it's Mick from Simply Red. You're listening to a special American Top 40, the top 100 hits of the year.
Around the world with a shadow of love. Casey's Top 40.
I'm Kasem, counting down the 40 biggest hits in the USA. Moving up 3 notches to number 25 is the band Simply Red. After their last tour, lead singer Mick Hucknall put on some weight. So much weight that the British rock press nicknamed the singer for Simply Red Amply Fed. These days, Mick is slimmed down, but his band's latest hit, it just keeps getting bigger. Here's Stars.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Mark Elliott for Kasem. These are the hits you're buying and radio stations are playing from coast to coast. Rising a notch to number 24 is a band led by singer Mick Hucknall. Mick joined his first band back in college, a band called the Frantic Elevators. But the one taking him to the top is Simply Red.
Number 28.
Slipping 4 notches is Simply Red, a soulful band out of Manchester, England, that went out on their first tour back in 1984, and what a thrilling tour it was for them. You see, they were opening for one of their biggest heroes, the godfather of soul, James Brown.
Hey, this is Mick of Simply Red, and American Top 40 is coming right back at you after this.
Shadow comes from down.
Music. From our Odd Couple file, Singer Mick Hucknall of Simply Red and actor Sean Penn have opened a club together in Miami. Now, among the attractions, models employed by the club who strut around a patio while the clientele just sit and watch. At the club's trial opening, our AT40 star spotters saw Johnny Depp, Dennis Hopper, Timothy Hutton, and rapper Snow.
Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was If You Don't Know Me By Now, by a singer so popular in his native England that his last album there outsold the Beatles classic Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Here in America, Mick Hucknall and his group Simply Red have sold a lot of records because of smashes like Holding Back the Years, but that's nothing compared to what they've managed in their native Britain. Mick and the band are so popular there that their first 3 albums all sold more than 1 million copies each. Pretty good in a country with a population of 60 million. And their latest album, Stars, has already sold close to 3 million copies, more than the Beatles' classic LP, Sgt. Pepper, one of the biggest selling albums ever in Britain. 4 years ago this week, Mick Hucknall and Simply Red had one of the biggest hits in the USA. Here's If You Don't Know Me By Now.
Casey's biggest hits.
7 years ago this week, back in 1989, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by the British group Simply Red. It's a tribute by lead singer Mick Hucknall to the classic Philadelphia soul song he says made him want to become a musician. Mick says that growing up in Manchester, England in the 60s and 70s, the music that spoke to him was American soul, especially the heartfelt sound of Philadelphia. His favorite act was a group called Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Mick says he'd spend hours in his room trying to imitate their lead singer, Teddy Pendergrass. And the song Mick loved the most was the one he respectfully turned into one of the biggest hits in the USA 7 years ago this week. Here's Simply Red with their remake of If You Don't Know Me By Now.
You never know.
From 7 years ago, Simply Red and If You Don't Know Me By Now. I'm Kasem.
Casey's Top 40.